The rain fell in sheets, carrying more than just water. It carried the weight of silence, the burden of history, and the unspoken fear that had lived too long in this small town. She stepped out of her car, heels tapping softly against the wet pavement, each step deliberate, her figure framed by the flickering glow of a street lamp. There was dignity in her stillness, the kind that did not need to announce itself. Across the street, people lingered under umbrellas, watching without watching, their silence louder than the rain. They had seen nights like this before, though none exactly the same. What set this apart was her gaze, steady, unbroken, as the police chief's voice cut through the storm. His words, sharp and heavy with disdain, carried a message older than either of them. "People like you don't belong here." She did not flinch. Calmly, almost with the rhythm of the rain, her reply came, "You don't know who I am." The words were simple, but they cracked the air like thunder, making him shift in place, though he tried to hide it. For a moment, the arrogance that clung to him seemed fragile, threatened by something he couldn't name. Then came the shove, sudden, violent, the metallic clang of her body against the car echoing in the empty night. The sound rippled beyond them, striking the silence of witnesses who chose, as always, to look away. He mistook her quiet for weakness, but in truth it was power. The rain disguised her calm, but not her resolve. This was no ordinary storm. It was a warning that his world was beginning to crumble, drop by drop. The rain still clung to her shoulders when she felt his eyes fix on her. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't duty. It was judgment long before a single word left his mouth. The police chief moved toward her with the swagger of someone who had never been told no, each step dripping with arrogance, each breath carrying the assumption of power. "Step out!" he barked, voice slicing through the damp air. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even procedure. It was the command of a man who believed authority gave him the right to humiliate. She didn't flinch. She adjusted her coat, her movements calm, deliberate, each second of silence pressing back against his tone. From the edges of the lot, umbrellas tilted. People stood still, pretending to look elsewhere, yet no one dared intervene. Their silence wasn't neutral. It was permission. They knew this scene. They had seen it before, felt the weight of it pass through their town like bad weather. Her voice finally cut through, quiet but steady. "Is there a reason?" No defiance, only composure that unsettled him more than anger ever could. His smirk widened. "Reason enough, as I asked." The words carried years of unchecked power, of doors opened for him that slammed shut for others. For a moment, the rain filled the silence, drops hitting asphalt, muffling the unease spreading through the crowd. She inhaled slowly, her eyes meeting his. He had judged her already, but what he hadn't judged, what he hadn't prepared for, was the calm that refused to break. The lot remained frozen, tension unspoken, until the air itself felt heavy. His authority stood tall, but beneath it, the first crack had quietly begun to show. "Step out." The words came again, sharper this time, carrying the weight of command, not justice. His tone didn't ask. It stripped. Authority was his weapon, and contempt sharpened its edge. She unlocked the door and stepped out, her heels pressing against wet pavement, each click a refusal to stumble. He expected panic, trembling, or excuses. Instead, she stood upright, her breath steady, her silence louder than defiance. That composure unsettled him more than protest ever could. "You think you're above the law?" His voice cracked faintly, just enough for her to notice. Her eyes lifted, not with arrogance, but with measured calm. "I know the law," she said softly.
"Do you?"
The bystanders stiffened, their umbrellas tilting slightly as if hiding their faces. They had no words, only silence, the same silence their parents once carried when justice failed others like her. He moved closer, jaw tight. "Don't test me. People like you never learn." Her silence stretched, the rain filling in what she refused to answer. It was not weakness. It was restraint, the kind that made his threat sound small. Inside, he felt the shift. Control was supposed to be his, yet her calm drained the certainty from his voice. The storm outside was nothing compared to the quiet storm standing before him. "Search her," he ordered a nearby officer, his tone cracking louder now. But even that command, meant to humiliate, fell heavy in the air, exposing desperation rather than strength. She did not flinch, did not resist. Her stillness carried history, the weight of every silence forced on others before her. And in that moment, it was clear. His voice could command, but it could no longer control. The shove came without warning, his hand hard against her shoulder, slamming her into the metal frame. The clang rang sharp, louder than the murmurs of the crowd. Pain cut through her side, but she didn't cry out. She straightened, breath shallow, eyes steady. Gasps broke through the silence, sharp, fleeting, then quickly died. The bystanders shifted uneasy, but their feet stayed rooted. Fear, habit, complicity, it held them still. He loomed over her, jaw tight. "You'll learn respect today." His words carried hate, not law. Her silence pressed back. Not defiance, not surrender, something heavier. Her calmness made the violence look smaller, uglier, stripped of authority. "You think staying quiet makes you strong?" His voice cracked louder, more brittle. Her reply came low, steady. "It shows who really is weak." The officer nearest to him froze, eyes darting between them. Even in silence, the imbalance was shifting. His rage burned hot, but hers, her stillness, turned it into a mirror. Every shove, every word, revealed more of him than of her. He stepped back half a pace, breathing heavy, trying to hold control. "Get her in cuffs," he barked. Yet even that sounded less like power, more like retreat. She stood against the car, her body marked by metal, but her dignity unbroken. Her silence carried centuries, each breath weighted with those who had stood before her, bearing worse yet never crumbling. The crowd's eyes changed. They didn't speak, not yet, but shame moved through them. Shame that his violence could not silence her. Shame that their silence made them part of it, and in that moment, without lifting her voice, she made him small. "People like you don't belong here." His words slithered out, loud enough for the crowd, meant to pierce deeper than the shove. Hatred sat heavy in his tone, as though law gave him the right to define her place. She turned her head, slow, deliberate. Pain lingered where metal had pressed into her, but her voice stayed even. "You don't know who I am." The air changed. Small, almost invisible, yet undeniable. His smirk faltered just a fraction, but enough for the nearest officer to notice. "What does that mean?" he snapped, leaning closer, needing control, needing her fear. She didn't flinch. "It means your words tell me more about you than they ever will about me." The crowd shifted again, whispers breaking through the silence they had clung to. One woman shook her head. A man lowered his phone, ashamed he hadn't pressed record sooner. The night had stopped belonging only to him. "You think you can stand here and lecture me?" His voice cracked with a sharp edge, but the arrogance that carried it before was slipping. Her reply came softer still, almost like a secret spoken only for him. "I don't have to lecture you." "You've already shown them who you are." He froze, chest heaving, eyes darting to the bystanders. For the first time, it wasn't her he was fighting. It was the mirror she held up without lifting a hand. The silence stretched long, longer than his anger could fill. And in that space, dignity stood taller than his badge, louder than his threats. The night had turned. Not by force, not by volume, but by the quiet truth of a woman who refused to break. The whispers of the crowd hung in the air, but deeper than that lived memories too heavy to fade. For years, stories of bruises and broken trust had been swept under the chief's desk, locked in files that never saw light. A janitor, face swollen, once begged for someone to listen. "He said I slipped," the report read. But the janitor had limped for months. A teenager once pleaded with trembling hands. "He dragged me for nothing." The words vanished in ink, rewritten as disorderly conduct. A mother, wrapped in black, stood outside the courthouse, tears hidden behind silence, her boy's name drowned in the noise of power. None of it reached daylight. The chief built his authority on that silence, each buried voice another brick in the fortress he hid behind. He walked with the arrogance of a man untouchable, the law bent into his shadow. But tonight, under the weight of her gaze, cracks began to show. She didn't raise her voice, yet every unspoken name seemed to rise with her presence. "You think this is about me," she said softly, her eyes steady. "But it's never just one night." His jaw tightened, hand twitching at his side. "You don't know what you're talking about." Her silence answered louder than words. The crowd, once frozen, felt it too. The stories no one had spoken. Suddenly they weren't forgotten. They lived again, heavy in the air, pressing against the chief's chest. For the first time, he looked smaller, as if the weight of every buried file was dragging him down. The night had stopped being only about her arrest. It had become a reckoning, one man against the ghosts of his own making. The chief's breath grew uneven, but her silence never cracked. The crowd leaned in, not knowing why this woman, soaked in rain and standing so still, carried an authority deeper than fear. She wasn't simply enduring, she was waiting. "I don't know who you think you are," he barked, trying to anchor himself, her eyes lifted, calm and deliberate. "You don't," she answered. Just 2 words, but heavy enough to pull the ground from under him. What no one there could see was the history she carried, files not buried but guarded in her hands, knowledge of every bruise dismissed, every plea silenced. For months, she had walked through this town in shadows, not as a victim, but as a federal official, higher than him, higher than his badge. She had come not to punish in rage, but to confirm what was already written in reports no one dared open. "You stand here," she said softly, "believing you decide who belongs. But law doesn't live in your fists. And tonight," she paused, letting his own reflection in the eyes of the crowd burn deeper than her voice. "Tonight it's not you who holds power." He blinked, once, then again, searching her face for doubt. None. His hand flexed against the weight of his own weapon. But even that looked smaller now. Around them, whispers thickened. "Federal," someone mouthed. A murmur spread, shifting the air until his authority, so loud moments ago, seemed paper-thin. The woman didn't move, didn't need to. Her silence became strategy, her calm became command. And the chief, who had wrapped himself in fear for years, felt it slipping from his grip. Power had changed hands, quietly, irrevocably. The whispers from the street hadn't died when the glow of cell phones began to light up living rooms, buses, and late-night diners. A shaky video, no narration, no edits, just raw, trembling truth. The clang of metal against her body echoed through cheap speakers and polished headphones alike. Millions saw it. Millions felt it. The town's silence, once armor for the chief, cracked under the weight of undeniable evidence. At first, the comments came in bursts. "Not again. This can't be ignored." Her silence says more than his rage ever could. The clip spread faster than anyone could contain, frame by frame dismantling years of his illusion. Inside the precinct, one of his younger officers muttered, phone shaking in his grip, "Sir, it's everywhere." The chief snatched the device, eyes narrowing at the frozen image of himself, hand gripping, eyes flaring, hate caught unmasked. His own voice barked back at him from the video. "People like you don't belong here." It sounded different now, smaller, filthier. She set you up," another officer whispered, but even he didn't believe it. The truth was too loud, too visible. The woman, seated quietly across the room, didn't speak. She didn't need to. The video was her voice now, louder than anything she could have said. He slammed the phone down, the crack of glass failing to drown the echo of his own cruelty, replaying in the world outside. For the first time, the crowd beyond those walls wasn't watching him with fear, but with judgment. And he knew, though no one said it aloud, that this time silence wouldn't save him. "You seen it?" The barista's voice dropped low, eyes flicking toward the small screen glowing in a customer's hands. "Everyone's seen it," came the reply. The video replayed again, grainy but clear enough. the clang of metal, the calm in her eyes, his spit-laced rage. By noon, whispers moved faster than footsteps. On sidewalks, in corner shops, across buzzing phones, the words carried weight. She outranks him. She outranks all of them. Neighbors who once looked away now held each other's stares longer, uneasy, but different. A man at the bus stop muttered, "Thought she was just some outsider. Turns out she's higher." Another, braver now, answered, "Higher than him, that's for sure." Reporters circled the precinct steps, pens and cameras ready. Questions weren't shouted yet, but murmured between them, feeding the air. How long has he covered this? Who else knew? Inside dim kitchens, former victims sat straighter. One woman, hand trembling around her tea, whispered, "If she can stand that calm, maybe I can talk too." Her son nodded, phone already in hand, recording a shaky message meant for the world. The chief felt it before he heard it. Silence, once his ally, no longer bent in his favor. His men shuffled quieter, glances traded over his shoulder, respect loosening its grip. "She turned it," one officer muttered under breath, turned the silence on him. And for the first time in years, the quiet around town didn't shield him. It pressed in, heavy, suffocating, because now every whisper wasn't protecting him. It was pulling him apart. He sat rigid, hearing nothing but knowing everything. The tide had shifted, and he could not command it back. The glow of the screen lit his face in the dark. Each headline carried his name, no longer wrapped in power but dragged through dirt. Chief exposed. Federal cover-up? Viral assault sparks investigation. The words clung to him like chains. His phone buzzed, but when he answered, silence met him. Another ally gone. He stared at the blank call log, thumb trembling. "Cowards," he muttered, though the crack in his voice betrayed him. Scrolling further, he saw his own image frozen mid-yell, eyes wild, veins raised. Next to it, her calm face, steady, unbroken. The contrast said more than any caption could. He whispered to himself, "They weren't supposed to see this." The room answered only with the hum of the screen. Shadows stretched long across his walls, pressing in, suffocating. For years, fear had been his shield. Now shame sat heavy, gnawing at every corner. Another message buzzed, "Don't call me again." He dropped the phone, chest tightening. "After everything I did for them," his voice trailed, thin, desperate. But even he knew it wasn't for them. It was for control, and now control had slipped away. He scrolled again, slower this time, as though each swipe was peeling away his armor. Headlines blurred, but one line cut sharp. She outranked him all along. He stared at his reflection on the black screen when the feed closed. No badge, no command, just a man shrinking under his own shadow. For the first time, he didn't look untouchable. He looked ordinary and terrified. The silence that once obeyed him now mocked him, louder than any crowd. Order in the court. The judge's gavel struck, but the sound was swallowed by silence. Every seat was filled, every camera light blinking red, yet not a word broke the air. The chief sat rigid at the defense table, jaw tight, eyes darting from face to face. Rage flared across his features, but underneath it, sweat rolled slow, betraying him. He clenched his fists, as though gripping the last thread of control. Across the room, she sat upright, calm as stone. Not a single outburst, not a single glance wasted. Her presence alone told the story the world had already seen. Restraint against violence, dignity against abuse. His lawyer whispered urgently, "Don't react. Just breathe," the chief snapped back, voice low but sharp. "They're vultures. All of them, watching me like I'm prey." The lawyer didn't answer. The silence around them spoke louder than either man could. A camera zoomed close, catching the tremor in his hand as he tried to adjust his tie. He knew millions were watching. He knew they saw it. "Why won't they say something?" he muttered, eyes scanning the jury, the press, the quiet audience. Because silence had finally shifted sides. Once his weapon, it now hovered above him like judgment itself. The judge looked down, steady. "Proceed." And in that single word, the balance of power tilted. The chief's mouth opened, but no sound came. Every excuse, every denial, every attempt at control dissolved before he could speak. The silence pressed in, unrelenting, stripping him bare in front of the nation. For the first time, he realized, the courtroom wasn't waiting for his defense. It was waiting for his collapse. The chief slammed his hand against the table, voice cracking under the pressure. "This is a witch hunt," he growled, spittle catching the light as cameras zoomed in. His face flushed red, eyes bulging with the same fury that once silenced an entire town. But she did not flinch. She leaned forward slightly, her voice low, steady, and unshaken. "No, this is justice." The words hung in the air like a verdict before the verdict. For a heartbeat, the courtroom froze. Reporters lowered their pens mid-scribble, lenses focused sharper, and whispers stirred along the benches. The chief sneered, trying to mask the quake in his jaw. "You think you can stand there?" She cut him off, not with volume, but with composure. "I don't think, I know. The world saw what you did. You wrote your own downfall with every strike, every threat, every silence you forced onto others." He opened his mouth again, but nothing came out. His rage, once enough to bend rules and bury files, now looked small against her restraint. The judge shifted in his seat, but did not intervene. It was not contempt of court. It was the truth finally spoken aloud. "She outranks him," someone whispered in the gallery. "She outranks all of them." The words rippled across the room, carried by quiet voices too long afraid to speak. The chief's shoulders stiffened, his power leaking with every second he failed to regain control. His bluster, his threats, his dominance, none of it could stand against one calm sentence. And for the first time, his silence betrayed him more than his words ever could. Justice had already begun, not with the gavel, but with her voice. A clerk entered quietly, a stack of folders pressed against his chest. The shuffle of papers echoed louder than any voice in that courtroom. He laid them on the judge's desk, the seal of the federal office stamped clear across the top. The chief frowned, his voice thin. "More theatrics? This proves nothing." The judge adjusted his glasses, sliding the first document into view. "On the contrary, these are official records. Federal oversight. Direct clearance." The woman did not move, did not smile. Her silence carried more weight than explanation. Gasps rose from the gallery as the judge continued. "It states here she is not a civilian, not merely a victim of circumstance. She is an officer ranked above you, Chief, federal authority, appointed years before your tenure." Whispers surged like a wave. Above him? All this time? Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashing. The chief's hands twitched, his voice cracking. That can't be right. I run this town. I give the orders." Her eyes finally lifted to meet his, calm, unshaken. "No, you only thought you did." He tried to stand, but his knees faltered. The gavel struck once, grounding the silence. His throne, built on fear, buried files and silenced cries, revealed itself as nothing more than paper, crumbling in front of everyone. The chief's lips moved, but the words collapsed before reaching air. His power had no sound left, and in that quiet the room saw what he truly was. Not untouchable, not invincible, but small. Smaller than the system he once controlled, smaller than the truth that now caged him. ChatGPT said, the clock ticked loud in the silence. His phone buzzed again, screen flashing the name of a man who once stood beside him at every meeting. He hesitated, thumb hovering, then let it ring out. He knew the pattern by now, call after call that ended in nothing. No one stayed on the line anymore. A chair scraped as he sat heavily, staring at the table where unopened mail piled high. He whispered to no one. "They'll come back. They always do." But even he did not believe it. The phone lit again. His daughter's number this time. His breath caught. He snatched it up. "Sweetheart?" "It's me." Silence. Then the line clicked dead. He stared at the screen until it dimmed back into black. His voice cracked in the empty room. "Please, just talk to me." From the window, He saw neighbors cross the street rather than pass his house. Faces he once commanded now turned away. Their children stared, tugged along quickly like he carried a sickness. He gripped the phone, scrolling through names, senators, officers, businessmen. Each one a reminder of nights filled with laughter, promises, cigars shared in back rooms. He called 3 numbers. Each went to voicemail. His hands trembled. "Don't do this. Not all of you." But silence settled again. The kind of silence that gnawed at walls, pressed against his chest, made the house echo with his own breaths. The man who once thrived on fear now sat in it, swallowed by shadows thicker than any prison cell. And for the first time, he realized what power stripped away truly left. Not enemies, but emptiness. The silence that had once suffocated the courtroom began to linger in the town itself. But this time it carried weight of another kind, expectation. A neighbor spoke first, her voice trembling. He came to my door once, told me to keep quiet or I'd regret it." She pressed her lips together, her eyes refusing to drop. Across the square, others shifted, their courage feeding off the sound of truth spoken aloud. "He threatened my son," another man said, his tone brittle but steady. "Made sure no one would hire him unless he followed orders." The words weren't dramatic, but each one landed like a stone breaking glass. For years, silence had been currency. Now those coins were spilling into the open. Reporters scribbled, microphones edged closer. Yet it wasn't the media that gave the moment power. It was the way townsfolk turned to each other, realizing they'd all carried the same burden alone. A young officer, barely out of training, stepped forward. His oath still fresh on paper, his voice cracked as he spoke. "We swore to serve justice, not to serve fear. That ends now." The chief's name hung unspoken, yet its absence screamed louder than if shouted. Each testimony, each nod of agreement, stripped away the armor he had worn for decades. She stood quietly among them, saying nothing. Her silence wasn't withdrawal, it was permission. She had opened the door, and now the town was walking through it themselves. What had once been whispers were no longer faint. They carried weight, direction, and defiance. And though the streets didn't erupt in cheers, the quiet conviction was more powerful. It marked the beginning of something no one could take back. The heavy wooden doors swung open, and she stepped into the daylight. No cameras flashed, no chants rose. Only the steady tap of her heels against stone broke the hush. Each sound carried farther than applause ever could. Eyes followed her, not in spectacle, but in acknowledgement. The same people who once crossed streets to avoid her gaze now parted quietly, making space she had earned without asking. One man in the crowd whispered, "She didn't even raise her voice." His words drifted, caught by ears that had been waiting for proof that calm could conquer cruelty. She kept her chin level, refusing both pride and shame. A woman brushed past, murmuring, "Thank you." Another offered a nod, small gestures, yet weightier than the chief's years of commands. The silence wasn't emptiness. It was respect, raw and unpracticed, settling over the courthouse steps like a new law. Inside, the chief sat crumbling, but out here, she didn't need to look back. The world had shifted. And though her heart beat heavy with everything it cost, her breath stayed steady. Her heels struck again, deliberate. Each step seemed to answer questions unspoken. What now? Who leads? Can change last? No speeches came. No victory signs lifted. Just her steady walk, firm and unhurried, declaring more than shouts ever could. Dignity is louder than their hate, she thought. The words never spoken, yet heard all the same. Justice doesn't whisper. It roars in silence. And with that, she disappeared into the crowd. Not above them, not apart, but among them. The story wasn't hers alone anymore. It belonged to everyone who dared to stand, to whisper, to finally be heard.